Hello. Alessio Cavatore joined Games Workshop as a translator in the mid-90s, and by 2008, he had been the head writer on Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40,000, and the Lord of the Rings strategy battle game, as well as the man behind countless Warhammer Armies books, supplements, and White Dwarf articles. I've been lucky enough to spend some time chatting with Alessio about his game design philosophy, what it was like to work in the studio with the legends of GW, and his journey to becoming one of them. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm in conversation with Alessio Cavatore. Alessio, thank you so much for joining me to sort of talk a little bit about your time working at Games Workshop, working on Warhammer and a few of those other games that you worked on whilst you were there. Would you mind starting by sort of telling a little bit about the story of how you came to be working at Games Workshop?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, first of all. Let's talk about the good old days. So I moved to the UK 1995, 6, something like that. That followed me. I was a university student in Italy. I broke my leg. I had to give up kendo and picked up a new hobby because I had crutches and things like walking sticks, and therefore I saw these people playing this amazing game in a role-playing games club. And that was the first time I saw Warhammer. So I was like, oh, what's that? So yeah, I picked it up, did a lot of studying of army lists and gaming, and a lot, not so much university studying. Then in '95, I believe, I won the Italian tournament of Warhammer, which obviously was a small affair at the time. It was like, I don't know, 20 people.
Right.
20 people using English rules. There was no Italian edition, and my Skaven, the Andy Chambers version of the Skaven, won. So I managed to win. Very exciting, and that got me an offer of a job from Games Workshop, funnily enough. So hence why I'm giving you the background. Is yeah, I met not that year, but the next year I was defending the title, and Gian Paul Brisigotti, who is now the boss of Battlefront. He was working for Games Workshop. He was actually in charge of creating Games Workshop Italy, and he was there. So we talked in English. So my English was good enough, and he asked me whether I would have liked to go to the UK to translate the product into Italian for Games Workshop Italy, the new fledgling new company. And so I was in university, biology, so really nothing to do with that all. But I thought, sounds fun. Let's try. Let's do it. So I went with the idea that if it doesn't work, I'll come back and finish the university and stuff. But it did work. Then I was a translator for a year and a bit, 2 years, something like that. And while I was a translator, this is in Nottingham. Basically, we were actually attached to the design studio, the little translation group, the Italian studio, as we call it, was attached to the main design studio, Games Workshop. So for me, it was like, arrived there, there's Andy Chambers, Jeremy Johnson, Rick Priestley. I was like, oh my God. So all these people you heard of before, you suddenly, you're there, you're interacting with them every day, you're working with them. So it was amazing. It was, for a fan, and it was just like, oh my God, I've died and gone to heaven. This is incredible. So yeah, it was, I did my translation, but also I played a lot of games. I got involved in the play testing of new stuff, being that we were in the studio, and the manpower is always useful. People that know the game, and I was, in my phase of super aggressive gamer. So I actually won the staff tournament of Warhammer. I was fairly aggressive at the time.
Was that using your Skaven again, or was that a new army? Oh,
Yes.
right. So really refined.
Yeah, it was Skaven for a while. I think the next army I moved on to was Bretonnians, and I had a Bretonnian army that was themed on the heraldry of Turin, of Torino. So it would be the Savoy, effectively. It was a rampant blue bull on a yellow field, which are the colors of the the monarchy, the Savoy monarchy. I mean, that's why the Italian football team has a blue shirt, is because in his honor to the king of Italy, former king of Italy. And that's why they're blue. Because can you think, the Italian flag, yellow, green, white, and red. There's no blue. Why does the national team have blue shirts? It's because of the Savoy monarchy heraldry. Anyway, so so I first Skaven, then Britannia, then Wood Elves. But I think I always go back to the Skaven. They are the army that is my favorite army, really.
Yeah, absolutely, one of mine too as well. It's hard to once you've made a Skaven army, it's hard to go back to do anything else, really.
Yeah, they're closest definitely to my heart. But anyway, so won the staff tournament. A couple of years later, I got offered a job as a games designer, games developer. So I think it was 96, 97, something like that. And I mean, I don't know. I think this was one of the questions you were going to ask me. Well, prevented. But at my first job, literally, as I walk into the studio, I walk upstairs from the Italian team to the actual design team. It's like, ooh! I basically get, the manager at the time looks at me and goes, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "My first day here. Is it? Oh, right. You don't have a desk or a computer or there's a chair there." have a chair and this notepad and this pen. Like, there you go. Talk to Tuomas Pirinen, who's was in the Warhammer team. So my first task was assigned by Tuomas was he was developing the vampire counts. So the first time that the undead were split into wet and dry undead. So it was the first vampire counts book. And basically my first task, Tuomas said, I need powers for these families of vampires. I think there were 4 at the time. There was no Strigoi yet. I made up the Strigoi on the next version, but the next edition. But so it was like, these 4 families, this is what they're like, blah, blah, blah. Explain it to me. It was like, write me a series of powers for them, in-game special rules. And I was like, okay. So I started to scribble on this piece of paper. That was the amount of equipment I had. Like, fun.
That's great. I mean, was that the sort of typical way that rules would be created then? Did it come from like, okay, we've got this theme or this concept, this idea, a story about this particular character or army or bit of the army. Now let's try and come up with some mechanics that support it. Would that be the direction of travel for that sort of stuff?
I mean, it varies definitely on projects and on armies and on individual units. And so sometimes it comes from an idea of the game designer, but most often comes from the IP. I mean, all the rules really, certainly my philosophy of what I've been taught and developed through the years is clearly the rules are the last thing. So you start with the story, the world, the IP, then the model range, because obviously that requires a lot of investment, up front, sort of sculpting and molding and all of that. So it's like IP, model range, rules to cover the model range. I mean, it's not always a strict rule. There would be the time when somebody goes, why don't we do a unit that does this, this, and that? A special thing, flies and fires, and flames, and whatever. So somebody could create an idea which maybe comes a bit from a rules angle, and then you maybe can make it way back into a model, into the world, create something actually that then gets written up in the world. But that's unusual. I think normally is the other way around,
right?
Which I think is the right way around, because obviously, in terms of resources and investment for the company, is a lot easier that way than the other way around.
So when you were straight into vampire counts. What was the sort of then the next step? Was it continuing to work on the Armies books, or was it getting more involved in the sort of core systems, or where did the journey go then?
But as a junior designer or assistant games developer, whatever the title was, you certainly work on first you kind of working with somebody who has the kind of the lead designer on a project, in this case the Vampire Counts book. So you would be assigned to other people that are leading for a book, to make an expansion, an army book, or a new edition of a rule book. And obviously, all of this is the way the studio worked 20 years ago. So obviously, I have no idea if this bears any resemblance with the way things are now. So obviously, I left 2010. So all the information. There's a lot of work on White Dwarf as well. At that level, you're asked to write articles, come up with ideas, or write into templates like do a battle report. It works like this, and you get drafted into that. Which obviously, again, for a newbie, it's all amazing. It's like some things are challenging, some things push you out of your comfort zone. Obviously, in my case, obviously, being that English is not my first language, I was a little bit daunting, the idea of writing for publication in a language is not the first language. So I always was a bit like, I must be very careful with my language and stuff. And I guess I'm always been more of a rules writer than a background writer, as you move on, then you get to write bits of background in core text, and obviously for me that was more challenging than rules because I'm very that way minded. I'm kind of a attention to detail, rulesy by nature. I like order. I try to bring order to things, and sometimes manage to. And so basically, I learned obviously some years of learning, and I always written things, and then went to colleagues, senior colleagues, and say, "You read this. Does it read well? Can you give me some pointers?" People like Jervis was always very helpful, in giving me feedback. Rick, I think I always quote Jervis and Rick as my two main mentors. But I mean, I've learned so much from other people like Thomas and Andy Chambers, Gavin Thorpe. A lot of people have taught me stuff. But I always go Jervis and Rick are my role models. And senseis, I don't know, people that have taught me stuff a lot. That was the start.
It must have been fun then. Did you work closely with Rick Priestley and with Andy Chambers on particular projects as well through that time?
Oh yes. Rick was obviously in charge of the studio at the time. He wasn't doing design so much at that particular time. But yes, I definitely was working. The team had Andy Chambers and Jervis and Nigel Steelman, Thomas Perin, and Gavin Thorpe. Those were kind of the game designers at the time. And I was like a junior designer in that team, and actually I had a lot of very, very good experienced people to learn from. Absolutely. There was Paul Sawyer at the White Dwarf. Robbie Juice, then Paul Sawyer. But I had some very good. I've learned a lot in those years. Everything I know, really.
And were you working then across all sorts of different projects? So both 40k and Warhammer and sort of what would become specialist games and just everything going through the same studio, just moving with whoever's available?
Well, obviously the structure changed several times through the years. At the very beginning, things were a bit more, like this team handles pretty much everything, and there's different projects and get thrown at the team, and the team gets subdivided, etc. While later, as the company grew and we moved from the studio in Castle Boulevard, we moved to the Lenton site, the current site. Then, bigger place, bigger amount of people. Maybe they create a specialist games division, and so there's a separate group of people that does that. But Forge World, all these other sub units that create material, create rules and text and models, games are created. Nevertheless, I was always in the kind of the central Warhammer 40k group, and then Lord of the Rings. But that group nevertheless worked with all the other ones. There was a time when they say, Forge World needs some help with this book, they want this unit, blah, blah. They want to make sure that they match the new release that you're doing. So obviously, you go and work with them and interact, so it's not in isolation.
Right. Because it was a period of huge expansion through that time as well, wasn't there? So you talked about the sort of creation of the Games Workshop Italy, and there was the internationalization of Games Workshop under Tom Kirby, where they were creating all of the sort of different geographical hubs and expanding into new markets and lots of money coming into the organization and lots of changes there. What was it like almost culturally, I guess, within Games Workshop as it almost evolved through that period?
Yeah, I mean, the culture did change. When I joined, was the first few kind of foreign translations, foreign editions. You know, the Germany was ahead of us, and France. You know, those were a few, like a year or two ahead of Italy. And then new countries got brought in, like Japan. So you know, so Italy's kind of like in the middle of that progress. So we definitely saw it growing. The culture changed a lot. Obviously, I moved to England in 1996, 97, and Games Workshop was very much a laddish, male-dominated, small company. And, you know, there have been some interesting things that these days would not go down very well in terms of being politically correct, for example, at the start of my career. You know, like jokes about Italian tanks having reverse gears and blah, blah, blah. In the workplace, a lot of that, you kind of go, yeah, these days people wouldn't do that. But you know, obviously with the growing international crowd there was obviously in the students started to be people from all nations, etc. Then of course it becomes international. Some sensitivities are developed where you go, yeah, don't you know, don't prod nasty jokes at people. They get upset. It's like, yeah, okay. So you know, and again, there were far more women. The thing became more cosmopolitan, more. I would say less, you know, not so much populated by that slice of the gamer, which was the original studio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then so within those sorts of changes as well, did you find that influenced any of the almost the rules writing? I guess. I mean, we see now because it's a much more international organization. There's almost a move to let's use more symbols on cards rather than have to print different languages. Let's simplify rules so they're easier to translate and things of that nature. Did any of that sort of come in during your time, did you find? Or was it just very like, let's just create the best rule for the job and then we'll deal with translation or whatever else it might be later?
It's never a contradiction. Nobody would say, oh, yeah, let's do this if it's not the best rule for the job. You know, nobody would consciously do that. Obviously, things like, you know, creating international, more easily translated set of rules or product cards, like you say, you know, if there's less text on this map or on this card or on this whatever it is, then it would be easier for translation. Definitely, that was the start of my career dealing with translating. I was a translator for a year and a half, some 2 years like that. So yes, we were trying to make the designers, the writers in the English world aware of the fact that there were translations. Like, you know, like German is a lot longer, so the same sentence would take a lot more space in the page, and therefore maybe you say to the English, to the British edition, like, could you maybe, you know, put a paragraph of text and then a filler, like a picture in the middle between this paragraph and that, so make it a bit more airy, a bit more spaces, don't fill the space, because when we translate it into German, we're going to need all of that space, and all of those fillers will die. It will be deleted to fill it, cram it with text. Or Japanese, I mean, again, Japanese text being very different in the way it lays out. So being more aware of different needs of different languages was a thing at the time, and I'm sure is even more of a thing now, of course, like you were saying, because obviously modern board games, etc., are indeed very, very pay a lot of attention to that, using symbols instead of words and that. But, you know, it's already started in 95, 96, 97 when I was at that, yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense, of course. Like you say, there's lots of different factors that go into that. So, yeah, of course. So you were working on the core games during that period. You worked on Warhammer. You worked on aspects of 5th and 6th and 7th edition there. What was do you have any sort of reflections on working on Warhammer Fantasy as a system over the course of that period? What was that sort of experience like?
Well, for me, it went from being indeed a junior assistant developer on helping other designers on main projects like an army book or a rule book to actually doing fairly well, and therefore being, you know, what I did seem to appreciate it. Indeed, I was given more responsibility, and indeed, then I became a full-fledged game designer. Therefore, I was given directly responsibility for initially an army book. I think my first Army book was the Empire. Yeah, it was the first one where I was the lead writer. Was an Empire book, blue, the blue one, the one with the blue cover. I don't remember what edition it is.
Yeah, so I think I might have it here then. If it's that's the 4th edition. Is the blue? So it wouldn't have been that one, would it? That was the 4th edition one.
I don't know. Can you open and check the credits? See, for me, there's so many supplements.
I think this one's the one that doesn't have a credit because I think a lot of the writers worked on that one. So it might have been
maybe the next one or the one before. I don't know.
Yeah,
it was a long time ago.
There's this one.
So many games. Check the credits, please.
Let's take a look. Yes, this one's you. So I think this is 6th edition then.
Right. Okay. So that would have been.
I think that's right.
Probably, or the one before. But anyway, so that, or the one without the credits, maybe, could be, if that was the one before. But anyway, so, and again, that was my first book. You learn a lot of things. I remember writing a scene where one of the electro counts is killed by an orc warlord, and then Rick Christie going, no, you don't do that. I was like, what do you mean? Like, no. You don't kill important named characters with unknown things you just made up. No. That's not how it works. So the thing was like, oh, it wasn't actually dead. No, they thought it was dead. Oh, like classic Marvel comics. Is he dead? No, not really. Not for long, kind of thing. But yeah, so that was the first thing. Started with board game. Sorry, with Army Books. Then eventually I was given actually the lead on the next edition. I think it was 6th, wasn't it? And sorry if I forget my editions, but
sure. So I think it was. So you're the sort of sole credited author in the 7th edition book, and I know you worked on the team for 6th edition, according to the credits at least. So yeah, I think you were sort of heading up the 7th edition, is my understanding. So
right. Yeah, so again, apologies. I really, for me, it's a
long time
with
back.
a lot of supplements and books and rules, and, followed by years of the same thing. So obviously, it gets a bit jumbled up. In fact, I have a funny story, if you don't mind. I went to a tournament in Hinkley at the Black Dragons miniature store of 6th edition Warhammer a couple of months ago. So I bring my Skaven. I dig out all the material, the whole things, and make an army list. So many flashbacks, like I don't know, 20 years before. so I go to the tournament, start playing, and it's hilarious because people start recognizing me, and I go, and they all have army books, and half of them are by Alessio Cavatore, and I was like, I don't remember anything. It's like, I really don't remember. And they were like, oh, but you must know this. You've written it. So I was like, no, really, no. Sorry, how does this work again? So, which is funny. But the funniest thing was, I get my Ratogers get charged, lose a fight big time. I'm on a break test on stupid conditions, and I go, well, only a double one will save me at this point. I roll the dice, and of course, snake eyes, and I go, oh, stand up in the middle of a crowded room of gamers and go, yes, double one, yes, fantastic. And silence. Everybody looks at me and goes, what is he on about? Like, well, double one, automatic success on everything. Like, they were like, this is 6th edition. There is no such thing. 7th edition, yes. I was like, ah!
Oh no. Oh, I mean that's heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking.
So funny, very embarrassing because everybody thinks you're not trying it on and stuff. And you're like, no, I just don't remember the difference. Oh dear.
But I think that is a testament to that being a good rule, though, because obviously by the 7th edition, that you get that excitement, you get that last ditch chance to win. So I'm always a fan of those last minute rallies, which is nice.
Like our rules, I guess, is a matter of taste. If you prefer more automatic mathematical successes, or if you prefer the randomness. So like what you learn for years is that there's different rules for different people, different tastes, different opinions and stuff. But yeah, it was hilarious, the fact that I clearly didn't have a clue. It was funny.
Yeah, but I think we can forgive you, given that you have got a lot of different rules under your belt, having worked on
Yes,
so many different parts of the system and rule books and all sorts of stuff. I mean, so
indeed.
the because you were also, I think, credited as one of several writers on that 8th edition as well that sort of brought Warhammer to a close, which I'm sort of assuming was not known going into the creation of
No,
it.
oh no, oh no, no.
No, I mean, what was, because I think you'd left before, or a
Yeah,
fair few years before that happened. So
yeah. I left in 2010, and
right,
there was no big thing at the time of any of
right.
that. No, no, no. So when I left, there was no. At least at my level, obviously. Maybe it was something they were talking above my pay grade. You know, but
Sure.
as far as I knew, I didn't know anything at all.
Did you have any sort of final reflections on working on that 8th edition, and sort of, was it kind of bittersweet at all, given that it was your last edition to work on?
Well, obviously, I guess when I was working on it, I didn't know it was going to be my
Right, sure.
station. But I think at the time, a lot of my energies and love were mostly into the Lord of the Rings, because obviously, after working on Warhammer, doing the main rule book, then again, they obviously trusted me and they gave me the 40K, the next edition to do. That was like, there was a time, the peak of my career against Russia, when I had my name as the lead writer on the Warhammer 40K and the new Lord of the Rings books. So I was like, oh, woohoo! And so, yeah, I think last part of my career was more Lord of the Rings. For the last, I mean, did the first one as a team with Rick leading the project, so the very first book, The Fellowship of the Ring, creating the system. But after that, Rick went, "It's yours." He handed over the Ring of Power. My job title was Ring Bearer. Funny, on the contract. And basically I had to carry the ring of the Lord of the Rings system for quite a few years. So I guess that's the last part of my career is definitely more Lord of the Rings. Of course, I was still involved with other systems, etc., but more heavily on Lord of the Rings.
Was it quite different working on Lord of the Rings, given that it's an IP that kind of already exists? You've got a certain, like, almost maybe more restrictions in what you can do from a creative perspective, I suppose. Certainly in terms of lore and story and stuff. So did it have a different feel working on that to working on Warhammer and 40K?
Yeah, very much so, of course. The Lord of the Rings, I mean, always loved the background of 40K and Fantasy Battle. However, for me, Tolkien, I always say this, I'm not religious, but the closest thing probably I have in my life to a religion is Tolkien, is Lord of the Rings. I read that, as a lad, and then in Italian first, then in English. It's the kind of book, read it every year. And I was, when the film came out, I was, so the idea of, and I guess because of this passion, because of the knowledge that came with it, that's part of the reason why I did end up getting the job of being in charge of that system, because I was the one with the most drive and love for the thing, definitely. So it felt like a mystical experience being then involved in the filming, getting a cameo extra thing in the film, being on set. It was, a magical moment. Sure.
Which one was were you in? Was it Return of the King? Was it
Return of the King?
The Perrys were in as well? Was that right?
Yeah. It's me, the Perry twins, and Brian Nelson. We are the dead riders of Rohan around the elven cloak that Pippin finds, and is Merry's cloak that is, Merry's wounded under an Urukai when he finds him on the field of Pelennor.
That's very cool. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, if you go on my Facebook page, I published all the autographs and the pictures, the photographs from that period. There's a section to that. It's like, good memories. Good memories.
That's great. And so obviously that was a sort of big undertaking working on the Lord of the Rings piece. You mentioned there that you'd done the 40K. I think, was that 5th edition that you'd worked on for 40K? I think that's right.
You're doing it again. I would say, hey, check the credits.
Forgive me. I'm putting you on the spot. But did you have any sort of reflections on what it was like working on 40K as opposed to Fantasy Battle and Lord of the Rings?
But 40K is and was the biggest thing for Games Workshop. Obviously, is the core of the product range, of everything. So obviously, it's a big responsibility. I don't want to get that one wrong. I mean, my philosophy throughout has always been tidying up things, paring down things, cutting down stuff is always too much to some people's opinion. That was too much of a simplificator, if you want. So I got into heated discussions about, wanting to make things really simple, and the people saying that's a bit too simple. I was like, surely not. There's no such thing. I think it was funny that I realized after years of using the language, I was using the word, the term chess-like as a positive. Oh, this is chess-like. While quite a few other people in there around me were using chess-like as a negative.
Right.
So there was definitely an incomprehension on the core. I was like, for me, something like chess, amazing. Something where, if you want, the ideal of my holy grail of game design would be when you play chess, you're not thinking, what are the rules? How can I do this? How does this work? How that works? Your brain is not doing any of that. Your brain is thinking, so I do this, then he does that, and I do this, then I do that. So I could do this, or I could do that. What if I do this? Yeah. So the rules don't exist. They take no space in your brain. Yeah. The rules, you have them. Sure. You're thinking of what to do with your troops, with your assets, and how to best exploit your assets, and the battle in your head. And so that's what you want in a war game, which obviously I realize, after many years, is not quite possible in in the environment of a war game. Obviously, the more you go wild, free, dioramas and terrain and unit modeling and state measures, you can be that precise, of course. But I was always trying to. I remember one of the main things I did was, when I started the job, was taking all the profiles of all the units in all the army books at the time when I started. So more or less after the Vampire Count book, I just went, the points values, they're all a bit strange. And so I took all the profiles, all the point values, and put them all in a big giant spreadsheet and compared them all. I just went, this costs this many points. So I started to churn numbers and theories about point values, etc. Because in my head, I had that thing of, clearly there must be a perfect way of getting everything balanced, etc. Which, you keep trying. I keep trying today to the war games and the board games I designed. But after I realized again, there's so many variables, there's so many intangible things where actually, how much is fear worth? When you're talking about the stats numbers is easier, but then you go into, this causes fear, this causes terror, this is ethereal, this is undead. How many points is that? So there is a degree of judgment call and everything. So it's not rocket science. But there was, that if anything explains the drive that was pushing me, like, find the balance, find the, and then cut down the rules, so it's easier to find that balance, kind of thing. You don't need long, convoluted rules.
Yeah, I mean that's fascinating. That, because I've always wondered if there was any kind of was there a calculation to how many points something should cost and how many there should be in a unit and sort of those kinds of factors. But I guess you're right. There's just so many variables. A certain amount of it has to be on the experience of the designer, having a good feel for how it might affect the wider table, right?
And playtesting, yes.
Right.
Lots of playtesting. Because again, you start with your gut feeling, your experience, indeed. And, very often you find you get it wrong to start with. But the only way to find out is to play games. And again, there was an attempt of trying to rationalize, optimize the process of playtesting again by going, all right, so we'll have a standard army, this basic army, humans, empire. And we'll make it, as balanced as possible, as nice and, not spiky. A bit of close combat troops, a bit of missile troops. So a nice general broad army, and that becomes the standard, the blank, the test kind of thing, and then you start to test everything against that. But of course, you don't want to test everything. So the process of testing against both the standard, the middle, and the extremes. Try it against the all shooty army. Try it against an all chargey attack army. Try it against the whatever you think of all the potential. So you try to optimize your playtest, because obviously playtest, the more you playtest, the better, but obviously you can't playtest forever. Things need to be published, right? So we try to optimize the amount of playtest time to get the most out of it. And that was me trying to maybe bring some of the statistics from science, from my biology studies, where you got a lot of statistics and math, like samples and into the process.
Yeah, because I'm guessing as well that playtesting is quite a labor-intensive and a time-intensive part of the process as well. So, I mean, is there a lot of time available at the end of the development cycle to do the playtest, or do you have to squeeze loads in a very short period?
Well, it's a iterative process, as they say, as in you write playtest, input corrections, and again, playtest, input corrections. The process of testing a new version and inputting corrections, again, it requires discipline that you learn for the years of. Don't make corrections on the fly. You have a version, make notes, but continue to play that version. Even if you think, oh, I'm going to change that, don't change it on the fly, because then it's like, when we play testing, a different person doesn't know that you're going to make that change. So stick to that. Then freeze, input all the corrections, make the new version, start testing the new version. That should be the discipline. Of course, the real world is a bit more gray than that. But so you try to do it as many times as possible, to answer your question, obviously. At some point, a manager, we call them supervisor, manager, not a creative person, has the job, very important job, of going to the creative person and go, stop. We need to publish this thing. You need to send it to print. No, let me play test it a few more times, because I can get it better, smoother, more balanced. It's like, you had your time. Now it goes. And obviously, it's always a balance. Where it's like, give me another week. No, it has to go now. All of that, and you have the sales pressure from the sales force of course, you need new releases, and you want to keep them because you want to make them better, spend more time on it. And also, it's a diminishing return, because it's true that the more playtests you do, the better it is. But obviously, the first bit of playtests tell you more, and then it becomes really much a fine-tuning thing. So at some point, you have to cap the process. It has to go, right? So interesting balance there.
Yeah, and I'm guessing just you can't account for the skill of the players, or can you? Do you sort of, how do you find relatively matched players in order to make sure you're getting a test of the rules and not a test of the general?
Well, internally, you try to have a team that is kind of made of people that have different strengths and different things. So I remember me again, I would be a good sounding board for rules. I would give you, this rule is a bit complicated, this rule contradicts that one. So playtesting with me would have been more about army balance and rules, etc. But on the other hand, you want an opinion about the feel, the fun, and you have people that are more sensitive to that. So you make sure that the team has a bit of balance of people that love different parts of the hobby more than like some people will give you painting feedback and assembling feedback. It's like, this thing actually, that piece is different. So there are different people that test for different things internally. When you go external, obviously, ideally, you want to have a external group of trusted playtesters that you can send the beta version, gamma version, whatever, to play test and give you feedback, while keeping it secret, not leaking it out to the public. So it's a very delicate process and complicated. NDAs, and sometimes people betray your trust. And what do you do? When somebody leaks something, it's like, what do you sue people? How do you demonstrate the damage? So there's all sort of interesting, complicated things, and you try to get as much feedback and internal playtest and feedback from external playtest as possible. But again, sometimes you have to be very careful with the external playtest people, because sometimes some people are very good playtesting, some people are definitely not. Some people understand that the process is, this is the game, try it and tell me what's wrong, what doesn't work, etc. Not read this thing, don't play any games, and just give me your opinion of things. Because That's not really very useful because obviously everybody has an opinion. Everybody would make things slightly different. Oh, why don't you do this like that? I would have done it like this. Like, not interested. I'm interested in, is there anything broken in this thing I've given you? Have you played it? Not you read it and gave me your opinion. Like, so you know, you go through a period of filtering your external playtesters and find the right people for the job. Not easy.
I'll bet. Yeah, it sounds probably more complicated than I'd given it credit for. Yeah.
It is a lot of work. You're right. Playtesting, that part is a lot of work.
I just wanted to return back to something you were saying about the sort of chess-like idea, and that you're sort of looking at it from the perspective of, sorry, my cat's lying on my keyboard now,
Of course,
trying to cancel the call. I'm sorry. So you're looking at it from the perspective, okay, so something that's chess-like is almost attaining that like Platonic ideal, that Platonic good of a game, a strategic game that's all about the players. And there's no hidden information, and it's going to come down to this balanced experience. What's the opposite to that? So when people were sort of seeing it from a different perspective when you use that term, how were they perceiving chess-like to be a negative?
Because they would find it daunting, complicated, and challenging, and not fun. So it's not, basically, I had for a long time people saying, well, why is this fun? And I was like, well, fun for me is crush your enemies, drive them before you, and listen to the lamentation of their women. That's fun, right? Is there any other fun? And in wargaming? And so obviously you have, again, very different people that actually very much what I've learned through the years, obviously, of mellowing down and playing with the Perry twins, where almost like the rules don't matter. It's almost like a role-playing game. And that's, I think, is the extreme. The other extreme that you were talking about is there's a chess-like, my mind against your mind. I'm trying to outwit you and do these things in a balanced environment. And then there's the other side, which is no, rocks drift. Very few of us, Thermopylae. Like, no, it's not a balanced game. There's 300 of you and then 2 million of them. No. But it's fun, isn't it? It's evocative, it's cool. There's all this last heroic stand. So the game is not about winning, it's about how long can you resist before you die, kind of thing. How long can you hold this Persian army before you're all killed? So there is a far more narrative element, and some people, that's all they want from a war game. They don't really care about winning, losing. That doesn't matter. And when I play in campaigns with the Perrys, I'm very lucky they invite me to play these amazing games on amazing tables, with fantastic painted armies, fantastic terrain. So, but I had to learn, and I'm glad I did, that's not about winning. It's about having fun, having, a chat, and putting yourself in there and trying to be historical. And really, the best thing to do would be to do this. Yeah, but those are not my orders. Historically, I would have received orders, and if I wouldn't do that, right? So it's playing the story, not worrying so much about. Yeah, of course, everybody plays to win, even in that setting, but it's not the most important thing. It's not the only thing that matters.
It's interesting that, yeah, because I think I probably would put myself further on that end of the spectrum, because I quite like scenario-led gaming, and the narrative and the winning and losing doesn't really matter too much. But what you were saying about the rules almost just being, well, like they don't exist because they're so natural and sort of organic to the experience of playing the game that you don't have to think about them. You just have to think about what you're doing on the table. That's really appealing to me as well. So I feel like there's bits of both that can be really, really good and worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, if you could achieve a game that has that lightness rules, but still allowing you the ability of creating narrative scenarios and stuff. Like, again, role-play games are very much in that ilk, isn't it? Is the rules don't matter. What matters maybe that one person there knows the rules. Not all the players need to know the rules. The GM. When you play a war game with the GM, with the game master, somebody who's like, yeah, all right, I'll tell you what happens. You deal with it. Don't need to roll. I'll tell you what you need to roll. Don't worry about that. Just tell me. Yeah, which is fun. Again, sometimes it does happen that I go and play it with the Paris, with a system, with a rule system that I don't know. New rule system. Jervis has just created a new rule system. Go and play it. It's like, right, I don't want to know. I'll tell you what I want to do, and you tell me what happens in rules terms. It's interesting. It's different, but fun.
just thinking about that, actually, that prompts a question. So, because obviously there's loads of XGW staff members and members of the design team, all based in Nottingham. And I know that you go off and sort of have the games and get together and still play. But some of you are still working on other game systems and new game systems. Do you still share rules, ideas, and sort of challenge each other on those kinds of different approaches to rules and that sort of stuff, even to this day?
Very much. Yes,
Right.
very much so, indeed. I mean, as I said, for me, I tend to go back to Jarvis and Rake, being that they are my my senpais. But I mean, it happens many times that working here for companies like Warlord Games, like Mantic, all made full of Games Workshop staff people and owned by Games Workshop people like River Horse, like my company. So there's a network here of people that who's got the skills and who's good for some things. So it happens naturally that like, oh, could you come and play the game we're developing here? And they go, oh, sure, give me your opinion. And Jarvis comes and plays the game. And then the next time Jarvis is developing a thing, oh, Alessio, would you like to come over and play a game and tell me what you think? And Rake and the Chambers, yes, it happens all the time. You work together for many years. You know what you expect from the type of big person you're engaging with. So like, I know this person pays more attention to that. So yeah, we do that, which is fun as well.
There's sort of a sort of that external playtesting that you were talking about, but in a bit more controlled a way because you can know what to expect.
Well, also very different to if I have external playtesting with a bunch of gamers that I know play the game, enjoy the game, but I've never written any published game, etc. So they don't know the process of that so much. It's different from me talking to Rick Priestley and going, what's your opinion, Rick? Obviously, that for me particularly, I guess emotionally, it has a very different value. I know those words are gold, and I just they're like, oh, yep, well, listen to what he's saying. He knows his stuff, kind of thing.
I mean, I'm guessing as a designer, it must make it a very different experience to play other games. So I'm guessing seeing the sort of seams and the way in which it's been put together. Do you find that, or can you still immerse yourself in a game and sort of get lost in it and have fun in the same way as perhaps a non-designer might?
It's a mix. It varies. I guess it also depends on what point of the project you are, where you are, whose project it is. Sometimes you're right, the fun gets a bit spoiled because you look at whether it's your game or somebody else's game, or even a game that has nothing to do with any work. Literally, you met some friends and you're playing Twilight Imperium game. Sometimes instead of focusing on that particular game, we get stuck into rules considerations. Oh, wouldn't we house rules things like why don't we change this? This should work like this. And it becomes rulesy, and it becomes a bit more. Less of a let's enjoy this game, but more like almost a job kind of. And sometimes, you get too stuck with the game designer. If you play with a bunch of game designers, that happens, of course. Everybody has an opinion and would do things. But there are instead games where even games that I've written, even games that I'm working on, there are moments where you get into it, and I guess that's why I'm still doing this. It's fun, even when you're playtesting something. There are moments where you actually get excited about things, and one thing that I really like is I try to use as much as possible real line of sight, because for me, the process of real line of sight, as well as being a fairly straightforward rule and easy to write, has that magical effect that when you're standing on the table, you actually going down and looking at you're looking at the action from behind the toy soldiers. It's like my eyes I can see the thing from there, which instantly brings you in. You're in there a lot more, and which is why I tend to favor real line of sight if I can, because I think it has that great effect.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's almost like a mechanical way of getting a bit of role playing for a moment. Yeah.
Yes, you are that guy that is firing that gun, taking cover because there's all these people, all these enemies in front of you, etc. So, if you're down there and looking from that point of view, it feels different.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really interesting way of thinking about that. So when you were at Games Workshop, you didn't just work on those core systems. You didn't just work on Lord of the Rings. You also worked on a couple of the specialist games as well, and like Mordheim and Warmaster. Was there anything you remember from working on those kinds of games? Would that differ to doing the core games? Was there a different kind of feel or vibe to working on those kinds of unusual systems, I guess?
Well, I mean, it was the vibe, I think, was refreshing in the sense that you're doing something that is not your routine. I mean, obviously, nice to have a routine, which is writing games and stuff, but it becomes a process. I know how to what the status or the steps of doing this army book or core rule book or new edition. So after you've done it a while, well, actually, a completely new game pushes slightly different buttons. It's like you're in a new environment, you're creating new rules, you're creating a new system. So perhaps creatively is more rewarding, is more challenging and more rewarding because it's a new game. So I guess that has that, let's do something different. Yeah, something. I remember working on Warmaster with Rick, and again, Rick writes the core system, and then he goes, I need army lists. I need to test all these armies. And I was like, sure, I'll write you the army lists. So he knows the number crunching is something that I do as my forte. And so he gives me all the range of models. And I say, all right, I'll write profiles for all of these. And so when do you think we can start playtesting? I go, well, next week. And he goes, really? You have the armies ready next week? So I'm like, sure, yeah. All right, okay, so a week later we meet. And I was like, yeah, let's play test. High elves and I don't know, undead. I was like, okay, where are the armies? Like, there. So there's these trays with cardboard counters cut the same size as the bases, with the stuff written on the printed and the right color, with the cavalry being a slash, infantry being a cross, etc., with the numbers underneath, all the right space. The footprint of the unit as they were planning to do the range. I was like, there you go, all the armies already written up, printed, ready, cut, so we can play this. And it was like, oh no, I meant blue toy soldiers on bases, paint them, etc. I was like, oh, that, no. I was like, that's why you said next week. Because I was like, how are you gonna stay all night up painting and gluing stuff together? Oh no, I brought the stats and printed them and glued them on the cardboard things and then cut them. Oh. Tell me something about the thinking. I was like, yeah, toy soldiers, of course, yes, but I mean, the footprint is the same, so there's no difference, right? Let's fix some toy soldiers.
That's really super interesting. Yeah, it's almost the abstraction kind of stands in the way of the playtest for Rick Priestley, right?
It's more importantly is that playtesting for different things.
Right.
In my head, it was like playtesting for army balance, numbers. The numbers are on the bases and space and mechanics, geometry of the unit, the movements and combats and everything. And it was like, yeah, but what about feel, vibe? Is it fun? Does it look glorious? When you put it on the table, it has to look impressive. And so all of that we wouldn't really get, would we? Yeah, we wouldn't, would we? Or is it difficult to paint? Is it challenging? Do the bases not stick properly? Does it not enough space? All of the physicality, the spectacle, the vibe, the fun, the non-rulesy mathematical part of it. And they're like, there's not a lot of that in that playtest. I was like, yeah, right, yeah, there is that too, yes.
I mean, it's really interesting to hear you sort of talk and sort of think about it in that way and your kind of approach to the game design elements. Do you think that kind of informed your approach to the 7th edition, at least what you can remember of that sort of era? Like, because I guess the feel of 6th edition as well was a move towards a sort of a more trying to attain that balance and trying to get to a place where actually the armies are a bit more balanced, the rules are a bit more balanced and make a little bit more sense.
Particularly at the time, I would very much champion balance and order and simplicity and against the more fluffy roleplay-esque, write a rule that is, write a chart with 12 results and each result, like a giant table, and where you pick up things and throw them and all that. For me, that was anathema. I was like, but how is that going to work? What the unit lands on a thing, and then where do you put it? So that creates fun, weird situations which in your mind eye, when you think about it, is incredibly funny, it's entertaining, it's evocative. But in terms of rules, you're like, no, my God, no, don't do that complicated. No, let's write, one rule, simple thing, like, so. And again, like I said, possibly too much, because obviously what you learn through the years is that you want a balance of the things. Also, the different players want different things. Some players would want a more dry, simple, chess-like system. Some other people would want a wackier, super confusing. Not confusing. See, I say confusing, it sounds negative because I tend to lean the other way, but more entertaining, more fun, more
involved,
less precise, more narrative. That so and there's no right or wrong. There's some people prefer one thing, some people prefer the other. So obviously you try to do both.
I mean, it feels like they've almost been the two tensions in the design of certainly Warhammer Fantasy throughout its life, that moving between the kind of free form, just play with whatever you've got, kind of approach it in a sort of more narrative perspective, and then something a little bit more balanced and trying to get to a place of, it's more like chess, for instance. And I suppose the third factor, the third tension being the sales and having to make sure that things sell and people want to buy miniatures and play with them. And, after all, the game was created as a, for want of a better term, excuse to sell more miniatures back in the day. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's definitely always been those kind of elements at war within the game. So it's been reflected in different ways in different editions. I mean, I guess I was curious as well, even though it happened after you'd left. Did you have any thoughts about the end times and the end of the Warhammer world, given that you were so involved with it for so many years? Did it surprise you or sort of have an effect? Or
well, it surprised me, of course, like everybody else, because by then I was out, so I didn't know, I didn't see it coming, I didn't know, so I was like, oh wow, okay, that's done what? But from a company point of view, IP point of view, obviously I can see the reasoning. I was part of some of the conversations that kind of, I assume, led to that. So I understand it. From a fan point of view, obviously it's a bit shocking. They all kind of like, all that background you read, all the stuff like to a degree was real to you and you lived in, and if you role played into that world, and which I did, obviously for us geeks, super geeks, has a certain reality to it. So suddenly they destroyed the world, kind of thing. So it is a little shocking in a sense. But I hear that being brought back. I don't know. We'll see. But I don't know. As a gamer, yes, a bit shocking. As a professional, you kind of go, I understand some of the reasons there in terms of legal protection of IP and all of that, and so no, personally, I was by then was already out, so it didn't affect me probably as strongly as it definitely would have if I was still in the company.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you still play any GW games? Have you still got that Skaven army?
Well, I haven't for a while after that Warhammer 6th edition made me feel like I really wanted to, and I will play in more of those tournaments because I think it's funny. It just, it's almost like sarcastic. My complete ignorance and things. It's funny. So I definitely will want to play more of those. The one game that I keep playing now and again, not often, but I possibly my favorite game. I think it's still quite close to what it always has been, which I guess is part of it, is Blood Bowl. I like Blood Bowl a lot. I think Jervis has done a magnificent job there with the fact that it kind of has the best of both worlds, the precision, the neatness of a board game, but also the cool elements, the miniatures of the war game, and all together, which is, I think it's a great little game. And I now and again I do play Blood Bowl, yes. But a bit more Warhammer now would be cool. Maybe, I mean, I do love the background of 40k, and I still have 40k armies. So bringing out my Eldar again for a new bout will be also fun. Let's see. Yeah, it's just that there's so little time, so many games to play.
Of course there is. Yeah, it's always the way, isn't it? There's just so many armies that it would be great to get back to the table, but you can't do them all.
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out, Alessio. Was there anything that you wanted to just mention that you're working on right now?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think. I mean, River Horse, my company doesn't do war games. We do board games and card games, and we may get back into war gaming. There's a new project that we just announced, Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell. Well, no, I didn't say what kind of game we'll make, but certainly if we end up doing miniatures, I'm sure there will be some war gaminess in it. But no, other than that, I guess I keep working for Warlord, Mantic on their game system in terms of war game. I'm thinking of war because you're more thinking of war games, and so the war games that I'm likely to work on will be. There is, of course, Draco Studios, the Dragon Bond Battles of Valerna game, which it's a war game I'm working on. So yeah, I'm still involved with war gaming, still in the world of war gaming. I think bolt action is the game that I play the most, actually. The most tournaments that I go to are bolt action tournaments. So I'm very much in a World War II mindset at the moment.
Oh, that's great. And Ghost of the Shell, yeah, that's very cool. It's an excellent universe. I bet that'll be really fascinating to explore on the board as well, on a board game.
Yes.
Oh, terrific. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Alessio. I really do appreciate you taking the time out. It's been great to talk and sort of get some of your reflections on working at GW and working on some of these classic games. And thank you so much for creating them and working on them. It's tremendous stuff.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to say a massive thank you to Alessio Cavatore for being so generous with his time, with his recollections and reflections. I feel like I have learned so much about the process and the philosophy for the creation of the games that I love. It really was a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Alessio, for taking the time. I reached out to Alessio as part of my ongoing project to look at the making of Warhammer Fantasy, every edition that there's been, and how they've changed over time. There's still a lot of work for me to do on the final couple of editions. I want to make sure that I really get behind the story and how they changed and evolved and the business decisions that affected them. So there's still a bit more time needed to finish those off, but don't worry, they will be on the channel eventually. In the meantime, I have got some exciting stuff coming up, like a history of Judge Dredd at the tabletop, and perhaps Games Workshop's most highly regarded board game of all, one about a very spacious Hulk, as well as other GW board games and plenty of other videos too. Plus, I have some interviews with other legends from Games Workshop's design studio past. I'm very excited about those. I just need to make sure that they're ready to share with you. I want to thank you very much for watching. I am Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.